New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
And as is the case each and every Sunday night, I am so glad to be with you. Welcome to Who Do You Think You Are? This is a podcast dedicated to you, to helping you have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of genuine self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Why? Because we know that when we approach life in this way, we naturally and effortlessly have more room, more generosity, and more love for one another. And dear listeners, wide receivers, when have we needed love more than this very night? So welcome. We are live, as you know, and those of you who have access to the chat, I invite you to interact with me. Please feel free to leave a comment or ask a question or present your point of view. Any and all comments are welcome here on the show, provided it's within the scope of something that I can appropriately respond to in the time and the format that we have here. I also want to mention, please, let's keep the algorithm happy. And if you enjoy this content and if you've been a regular listener and have gotten something from these conversations, please like, share, and subscribe. You know, that keeps the algorithm happy. And when the algorithm is happy, it just simply puts the show out to more and more people. So thank you in advance for that. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, most importantly, if you are finding yourself struggling with something, really struggling, and it has you, and you're feeling compromised in some way, your health is compromised, your concentration is compromised, you're not yourself, I really encourage and support you to talk to someone. There is very good help available out there, very competent, qualified help. I really urge you to get some for yourself. Don't go it alone. Let someone accompany you. Let someone support you. Let someone, pull out of you the gifts that you have within you. I know that for sure, but maybe you haven't seen them in so long you forgot they are there. And so you need someone to help bring them out, bring them about. All right, so don't go it alone. If there's anything I could do to help you, perhaps you'd like help with a referral, or you have a question about psychotherapy or coaching, or any of the topics I talk about here, just let me know. Drop me a line at Catherine@CatherineDuca.com. That's Catherine@CatherineDuca.com. Let me know what you need, and I'll be all too happy to see what I could do to be helpful. So with that said, now let's dive in. So, you know, someone asked me the other day how I choose my topics, and that's really quite simple. I really don't exactly know what I'm going to talk about from one week to the next. I wait to see what my clients have to say. I listen very carefully to um, trends, um, to issues that may be more prevalent at one time or another. For example, this political climate, things going on in the world are bringing out certain emotions in people. So I listen for that. And beyond that, I just keep track of the things people struggle with. And if something strikes me and I think it would be an interesting topic, that's what I bring. Tonight is no different. You know, I think there comes a time in our lives, especially if we live long enough, when we realize a few crucial things. Um, and one of these crucial things is that, and this is an important one, not everyone deserves access to your heart. Let's just take a moment. Not everyone deserves access to your heart or your peace or your presence for that matter. You know, you come to a point where you realize that being kind does not mean being available to everyone all the time. And respecting yourself doesn't mean you stop loving people. At the top of the show, in the introduction, I say that this podcast is dedicated to helping you live from a place of genuine self respect and self love. And I, I mean it. I mean it. In some ways, I think self respect, well, I can't say it's more important than self love. It's an outgrowth of self love. Self respect is what we take on the road with us. You know, I have to get some hairspray, don't I? I don't know what's happening here with this hair kind of falling in my eyes. I'm sorry if it's annoying. Um, so you realize that you are the gatekeeper. You are the gatekeeper with and about your own emotional accessibility. You are the gatekeeper. No one can do it for you. And so respecting yourself doesn't mean you stop loving people. Here we talk about being open hearted. It doesn't mean you stop loving people. It does mean you stop letting other people throw a wrench into your calm. That's really what it means. And so this show is about self-respect. I mean, the show in general, but this episode is about self-respect, how to protect it, how to preserve it, even in the face of, and I would say, especially in the face of someone disrespecting you. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, how to protect your heart without shutting it down. How to protect your heart without shutting it down. So we'll dive right in. The question becomes, how do we do that? How do we respect ourselves in front of or in the presence of what some would call toxic people? Toxic people. Now, I have to say, um, toxic people or a toxic person is not a phrase that I really use very often. But I'm hard pressed to come up with a better term. And the research calls the person, the prototype I'm going to describe, a toxic person. I think the reason I don't like to use that term very much is because toxic people are themselves wounded people. They're very wounded people. And generally speaking, they're in a state of the absence, I would say, the absence of um, psychological insight. Um, I venture to say they are more closed off from um, their spiritual nature. Their pipeline to the infinite, I believe, is probably quite blocked off. And as a result, these individuals are living in darkness. And on some level, they are hurting. And I believe they are suffering, but they're not conscious of it. And so this wound is often turned inside out, if you will, and acted out on other people. So I'm not judging these people who will, for this show, be labeled toxic people. I'm not judging. What I am doing is describing and helping you identify the particular traits that come with emotional, psychological, spiritual toxicity. Okay. So let me define that to begin with. Let me look at my notes here because there's a proper definition. A toxic person is someone whose behavior is consistently, operative word, consistently hurtful, draining, or damaging to others. Let me say that again. A toxic person is someone whose behavior is consistently, this is not someone who, is having an especially bad day or going through a profound struggle. Because when that happens, that does not bring out the best in us. A toxic person is someone whose behavior is on the regular, hurtful, draining, damaging, demeaning to others. And, if you happen to be one of those others and you have been on the receiving end of this kind of behavior, boy, you know it, don't you? You just know it. But knowing it and being able to deal with it and deal with yourself in the presence of that energy is another matter. And so I'm going to distinguish between the two, between simply tolerating that behavior and managing it in a way that harnesses your self-respect. A little bit more on a toxic person and their character traits. They can be extremely manipulative and controlling and charming. That's the thing. You think you can see manipulation a mile away, but when it is wrapped in, dipped in chocolate, dipped in charm, dipped in love bombing, it's hard to spot as manipulation until it's too late, until you've already been burnt, right? So manipulative, controlling behavior, gaslighting, a disregard for boundaries, That's probably the hallmark of such a person, a disregard, and overlooking, a lack of acknowledgement, a lack of respect for another person's boundaries, a lack of empathy. All these things go together. A lack of empathy, a heightened need to be critical or negative, dishonest, and of course, a big one, an inability or refusal to self-reflect. If we can't reflect, or if one can't reflect, think about it. To some extent, this is common sense. If you can't reflect on your behavior, if you're, now let me say, generally speaking, we can learn to be self-reflective. We're not born that way. We can learn. And certainly when you enter something like psychotherapy or coaching, or you're in some kind of personal growth program, the whole idea is to self-reflect. But that entails two things. One, a willingness to self-reflect, and two, an ability to do that. And to have the ability to self-reflect, almost by definition, means you have to be curious and interested in your own behavior rather than in defense of it all the time. You have to be willing to question, especially when you get feedback from another person. You have to be willing to, you know, look through your inner eye and examine your motivation. Examine, as one of my mentors used to say, your come from place, right? That reservoir within. Where are you coming from? Are you coming from a constant need to be right? Are you coming from, uh, uh, you know, um, again, the only word I can use is constant, an uninterrupted need to have your needs met, all the while being completely out of touch with what other people need. So, you know, toxic people can be found in every aspect of life. And as you're listening, perhaps you're ticking through the people you know. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a team member, a manager, an acquaintance, a friend, a family member, maybe even a partner. I mean, when you're in the presence of this. And this behavior, there's no way around it, can have a significant impact on your well-being. Your well-being. The list goes on, and I'm going to continue with it because I think it's important to understand the, I'll call it the profile of a toxic person. There's a lack of accountability. You can't be accountable unless you're willing and able to self-reflect. So if I'm a toxic person, I can't or won't be accountable, then I will almost never place myself in the equation of what's happening between you and me. In other words, we have an interaction, we have a dynamic, but all I notice, all I see is how you're behaving toward me. I don't ever acknowledge what I might do to, let's say, engender a reaction in you. Now, let me say at the outset, each of us is responsible for our own emotions. Each of us is responsible for how we respond, for our own delivery. Okay, that's not anybody's job but ours. But toxic people don't ever really notice their participation in the equation gone wrong. They tend to, the word that we use as therapists is externalize. Externalize. Everyone else seems to be the problem. Do you know anyone like that? It's really never them, even though they're the common denominator among interactions that don't go well. But the blame is on everybody else. And in fact, the other trait is blame shifting. You say this about me, I'm not taking it in, I'm not reflecting, I'm not evaluating it. I'm just turning it back and kind of spitting it up back onto you. Blame shifting, externalizing. Does this sound familiar? Sound familiar? They're highly, highly emotional reactive. Of course they are, because they're not grounded in any psychological underpinning of, they're not rooted in a certain truth. They're not rooted in an understanding of, well, I have strengths, but I also have limitations. And maybe I'm in an interaction where my limitations leaked out, and the other person is letting them know they cannot let any of that in, you see? And of course, the manipulation. So, very important to understand. Now, in the promo, if you saw my promo on social media, I talked about how we're going to discuss tangible things you can do when you're in the presence of a toxic person. But I want to, by way of kind of a what is it, prologue, mention that before there is doing, there must be understanding. So before we can rush in and do, take action, I think we need to understand the nature of the person we're dealing with. Because when we understand that, we can then turn to ourselves and ask ourselves what we need to do. What we need to do. I see there's someone in the chat, which I'm going to get to the chat in just a little bit. Good evening, Michelle. Good to see you. I'll get to questions and comments in just a bit. All right. So let's go ahead and explore this in a way that I hope transforms rather than simply informs. Because this material that we're going to talk about, when applied, not simply pondered, but when applied, really has the ability to transform interactions. Transform interactions. Okay. So we have to begin. We have to begin with something that is widely talked about, but I hope to talk about it in a slightly deeper way tonight. And that, of course, is boundaries. Boundaries. Now, there are all kinds of boundaries. There are time boundaries, energy boundaries, spatial boundaries, money boundaries. These are all kind of frameworks that we operate within that quite literally, draw a line or have some sort of imaginary velvet rope around our time, our energy, our money, our space, right? The important thing to remember about boundaries, because I have so many conversations with my clients where they initially, even if they accept conceptually boundaries are a good thing, I have to say, I notice that people kind of bristle. And sure enough, what they end up telling me is that they feel that boundaries are kind of cold. They're, they're cold. And establishing them and maintaining them may hurt the feelings of another person, right? Let me know if that has ever crossed your mind, because that's a real impediment to establishing healthy boundaries. But it needn't be, because boundaries are not about shutting people out or rejecting them. They're about keeping your peace. Keeping your peace. And they're not cold barriers meant to isolate or insulate you. They are actually warm, clear guidelines that communicate to other people, communicate to the world at large how to love you and how to treat you properly. And here's the thing that I say all the time, and I say it in my introduction. When we do that, when we take appropriate care of ourselves and respect our own boundaries, almost by extension, other people in our orbit automatically take a cue from us without our saying anything about what they should do. Never, never. It just changes the energy. It changes the dynamic. It changes the dance. So if you protect your boundaries, somebody can't come in and mess things up. And, it's a limitation that actually benefits the other person as well. Because here's the thing, when people violate boundaries, other people's boundaries, and let's say unknowingly or unwittingly, on some level, they don't feel good about themselves. Now you may say, well, why should I care about that? I'm just trying to protect myself. Well, this just happens to be a win-win. When you take care of yourself and you honor yourself, that frequency gets transmitted outward, and other people just kind of they either will adjust, and there's a chance that they will, well, they'll have to respect your boundaries because you're not letting them in, or they will just naturally kind of, I call it moonwalk out of the relationship, because it won't have the same gratification for them. So they will either adjust along with you for the better, or they will kind of just, kind of fade away. And you, as a good boundary establisher and maintainer, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with that. Yeah, but I don't want to lose anybody. I like that person's friendship. Well, of course you do. Of course you do. I'm sure you may not like this aspect of their personality, but you may say to yourself, I don't want to lose that person. But then where does that leave you? Does that not leave you over a psychological barrel? So while I'm not advocating casually, ending relationships, not at all, I am saying that you may have to, in your own thought process, go all the way out to, well, if this person is unwilling or unable to respect my boundaries, then what do we have here? Where is the emotional understanding here between us? Where is the give and take? Where is where is insight meeting up with insight? So while we hear the term boundaries very often, I'm hoping now, to unpack it a little bit more so that you can, in a deeper way, appreciate the importance of maintaining good, healthy boundaries. So now, this is very important as well. The more you understand that your self-respect is contingent upon being able to care about yourself and your well-being enough to establish these boundaries, the more you understand that self-respect gets going and is established long before confrontation. Let me say that again. The more you understand the relevance of boundaries, the truth behind your boundaries, the more you understand that self-respect starts long before the confrontation. Now, the past couple of episodes, I've talked about confrontation, and before that, difficult conversations. What do you do when you have something difficult to say and it's very charged? I've discussed the how-tos of that, but there's work to be done long before we find ourselves in that kind of conversation. Now, we may, no matter what, because as I like to say, where two or more are gathered, there is bound to be at least occasional disharmony or discord or difference of opinion. Occasionally. When it's on the regular, then that becomes something else. Okay? So before there's the how do I smooth out this difficult conversation? There is the front loading, if you will, in our interactions. Hey, my boundary is letting you know where I end and you begin. Where I end and you begin. With my time, with my energy, with my goodwill, with my generosity, with my money. If you're asking me if I will lend you money, I mean it in that way. So you front load your interactions with that kind of self-regard. Self-regard. Okay, I think I'm going to pause there. We're at halftime. I think that might have been a mouthful. Why don't we take a short break, digest this, and when we come back, I'll take some questions or comments in the chat, and then I'll continue with some things you can do to set good boundaries and what that actually sounds like in real time. So you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? I'm your host, Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach. We'll be right back. Stay with me.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
What would Louise say? Join us every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Hosted by Reverend Martine Bernard. Explore the wisdom of Louise Hay. Brought to you by New Thought Media Network. Dive into Louise's teachings. Experience healing and empowerment. Reverend Martine shares insights. Connect with a contemporary audience. Unlock your potential. Transform your life with love. Embrace positivity and healing. Join our vibrant community. Ready to join us? Let's spread love and wisdom together. Please like, share, and subscribe. Only on New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
And welcome back. I am so glad you're here, whether you are walking the dog, whether you're relaxing on the couch, whether you are in bed, about to wind down for the weekend, whether you're driving, whatever you're doing, or if you're listening during the week. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking about how to maintain self-respect, even in the face of, and perhaps most especially in the face of, what some would call toxic people. So we're talking about that, and we're talking about the hallmark of self-respect, which is the willingness and ability to set and maintain clear boundaries. And one more word about boundaries before I take a look at the chat. You know, many people grow up, I think I got this message, feeling that boundaries are unkind, and they are kind of, you're thinking of yourself only if you set a boundary. I think I got this message from my family, my Italian-American family, who admittedly was rather enmeshed, on the continuum family dynamics. On one end, you have the enmeshed family, and we therapists like to use the line, in an enmeshed family, one person sneezes and everybody else catches a cold. There are virtually no boundaries in an enmeshed family. Now, this is on a continuum. So there's like super, super enmeshed, no boundaries. Then up a little ways from that are boundaries, yes, but they are more porous, if you will. In other words, they're not rigid, but they're not super, super non-existent. They're there, but they're porous. You know, you can catch a little cold when someone sneezes. At the other end is the disengaged family. The disengaged family. That's the family where someone can undergo, an operation, right? They can be in the hospital overnight having their polyps removed, and no one in the family knows. So that's disengaged. So where your family lands or falls on that continuum may have a lot to do, and when I say may, I mean positively, definitely, absolutely, has a lot to do with how you regard boundaries in your current adult life. So many people think, the people toward my end of the spectrum think that boundaries are kind of selfish or self-centered. And that leads to things like saying yes when it hurts, staying polite even when you feel you're being disrespected, or, do whatever you can possibly do to keep the peace, even if it costs you or me our dignity. So that's the difference between being kind toward yourself and actually ultimately toward the other person by establishing boundaries. There's a difference between being kind and self-sacrificing. You see, when we are self-sacrificing, when we give it all away, when we people please, when we're so afraid of someone being displeased with us or angry, that's a type of boundary. See if I'm being clear here. If you're afraid of those things, you're going to feel too apprehensive to, to say, no, this really doesn't work for me. This makes me uncomfortable. You will always play to the possibility that the other person won't like you or will leave you or will reject you. So if that's your overarching concern, that's going to fuel your tendency to not have any boundary. It's like your heart is their heart, your time is their time. Your willingness is at the pleasure of everyone else. You can see how exhausting. And self-respect is rooted. Here's a quote that I found from Brené Brown, actually. It's so wonderful. True kindness has its roots in honesty, not in exhaustion. That bears repeating, doesn't it? True kindness has its roots in honesty, not in exhaustion. How many times have I said, how many times have you experienced? You give and give and give because you don't have the boundary. Give and give and give, overgive. Not because you're not a nice person. You are a nice person, but just as much as you're a nice person, maybe even more so, you're afraid of being a lonely person. You're afraid of someone walking away. You're afraid of displeasing. And so you give and give and give until you're depleted, exhausted. And more than that, and I see this all the time, you kind of have a secret. In the back of your mind, you're hoping that your ship is going to come in, so to speak. You're hoping that when you need something, you're going to cash in all those chips. All the things I've done for you, you're going to do this one thing for me. And most of the time, you don't think it's anything, because by comparison to everything you've done, it does pale. But it might be a big ask. I don't know. But that's almost secondary to the point. The main point is, I've done so much for you, and you can't do this one little thing for me. Not good. Not good. It depletes you. It exhausts you. Worse, it sets you up to feel resentful toward the other person. But if you can't let that resentment show, again, we're right back to you can't afford to make that person displeased with you, then where in the world is that resentment going to go? Where's it going to go? I think it can only go, it can only go inward into your body. An emotion can get locked into literally the molecules of our body in our organs, or we act it out in some other way. We act it out toward an innocent person. That's called displacement. We take the anger toward this person whom we don't feel like we can express, and we transfer it, or really displace is the better word, onto somebody else. So really, it creates kind of a mess down the road. So this is the importance. Boundaries are not cold. They're not harsh. They're not selfish. They're actually warm invitations for how both people can go about the relationship. Okay, let me go to the chat. I saw a few things. Okay, Michelle, I think you were up first. You mentioned perhaps a toxic family member. Why is it often harder to exert your sense of self-respect with your family than with strangers or coworkers? Why is it often harder to exert your sense of self-respect with your family than with coworkers? Well, again, I think behind that question is the look back at where does your family fall, or at least growing up, where did your family fall on that enmeshed or disengaged continuum? Because if you're more toward the enmeshed, boundaries are taboo in an enmeshed family. And in an enmeshed light family, boundaries may not be taboo, but they're not taken lightly. So the expectations are different. The emotional connection is different. Complex histories, multiple roles, unrealistic expectations. And there's no formal structure in a family, is there? Whereas in our work life, we usually inhabit roles, and there's usually a policy and procedure manual, and there's something called HR if someone is swerving out of their lane into your lane. So I just think, Michelle, that's a great question. I just think that's where everybody has a stake in getting their way. And of course, we can't leave our family members, or certainly not easily or casually. That's a huge thing. Whereas coworker, you get to go home, right? But a parent, a sibling, a child, a cousin, whatever the case, much more difficult. Thank you for that. That's a great question. Dawn, hi there. A quote from Socrates. Yes, ma'am. The unexamined life is not worth living. Yeah. No, I think he knew what he was talking about. The unexamined life is not worth living. You know what? I don't even think the unexamined life is very enjoyable. I don't think it's very enjoyable, because an examined life calls for discipline, actually. An examined life calls for things like containment of our emotions. That's not the same, by the way, as repression of emotions. Repression is when emotions are buried so deeply we have no idea they're a part of us, but they are. Repression. Suppression is when we're trying to push an emotion aside. We're trying to sweep something under the rug. We're trying not to feel or acknowledge something. An examined life means looking in the mirror, doesn't it? And what we see isn't always, so we may not think it's so beautiful. But actually, honesty is its own beauty. Because when we grapple with honesty, things like grit come to mind. Courage comes to mind. The willingness to be wrong, which is to say the willingness to adjust, which is to say the willingness to grow. So there's a lot that comes out of the examined life. It's rigorous. It's not sloppy. It's more disciplined. It's more measured. That's not to say there isn't room for spontaneity. Of course there is. But you understand your come from place. And you're easy with yourself and you're gentle with yourself all the while, because these things are not mutually exclusive, all the while holding yourself accountable. I just think that's just, I could talk about that all day. Dawn, from this one quote, I could talk about the benefits and the opportunities and the gifts contained within the process of examining our lives. So thanks, Dawn. I love that. Okay, Michelle, I think that was your question from before. I hope I answered it. Janine, welcome. I feel like this conversation could benefit from a concrete example or two of a boundary a person might set, and for what purpose. Perhaps one will come up before you see this. Well, no, it didn't, did it? But I did plan on getting to that. So I already spoke about how the framework of a boundary is you declare where you end and someone else begins. A toxic person will view your boundary as a rejection and will take it personally and probably get uncomfortable and handle their discomfort by becoming defensive. But a person who is not bogged down, whose come from place isn't one of toxicity, will see your boundaries as a gift, actually. Even if they have to adjust a little bit, they'll see your boundaries as a gift, as an invitation to have a clearer, more balanced, and healthier relationship. So Janine, good question. What does it sound like when you have a good boundary? Well, here's a couple of ideas, a couple of thoughts. I'd appreciate it if you could, ... I'd appreciate it if you could. That's a very strong statement, I think, in a kind of a benign, gentle way. Hey, I'd appreciate it if you could give me a call rather than just stop by. You know, I'd love to have you over, but I might be in the middle of something. And, so I'd appreciate it if you could ... give me a call, whatever. I'm not comfortable with ... I'm not comfortable with driving this time. How about we, let's say you're going to someplace on the regular. How about we alternate weeks? But the I statement is, I'm not comfortable. So instead of hiding your discomfort or white knuckling it or concealing it, you simply say, you put it out there, I'm not comfortable. I need ... I need what? I don't know. I need some time for myself. I need to just stay in my pajamas all weekend. I really need to get out tonight. I've kind of been, I've been at my desk, too many hours or something. I need. Now, when you express a boundary, the other person, and this is a little commercial for non-toxic people who may have a competing need. This could be a whole other conversation, actually. You can have someone who says, okay, after you say, I'd appreciate it if we could alternate driving. I'm just not comfortable, or you know what, I'm not comfortable driving as it gets darker. Would you mind driving? If the other person says, oh, well, gee, I was really hoping you could because ... Now you go into, I guess, negotiation, lowercase n, negotiation. That's competing needs. and not competing in a clashing sort of way, but what happens when I need something and you need something else? Is there overlap? Can we have a win-win? Can we compromise? But I offer this in contrast to not expressing your need or your displeasure or your preference, not acknowledging it, acquiescing, and then holding, a little mini grudge later. So, Janine, let me know if that begins to frame out what it sounds like to put a boundary. I think the language on it can be clear, can be direct. If you use I statements, especially if your tonality is, clear, but there's nothing snarky about it. There's no reason to be snarky. It's I need, I would appreciate, I would like, I prefer, I'm not comfortable. How would you feel if? And then seeing what the other person has to say and take it from there. Take it from there. So, Janine, I think what your question suggests really, it suggests that, this whole idea of boundaries, I mean, it's an easy word. It's often, thrown around, but there are nuances to this. And just because you establish a boundary doesn't mean the other person is going to adhere to it. And that could be toxic or completely non-toxic person. So there you have it. In a nutshell, self-respect is the foundation, dear listeners, I believe, and the research bears this out, is the foundation for our well-being. If we are not willing or able to be the gatekeeper of how often and how deeply we let other people in to our inner selves and give of ourselves, if we don't realize we are the gatekeeper and we abdicate that power, each of us has the power, then we are at the mercy of, we're at the effect of anybody's anything, right? And that really will undermine our self-respect. So I want to just wrap this up by referring to a couple of things from my newsletter. But before I do, Janine, one last thing, if I can call you up here. Let's see. Those are good. I think having wording offered helps to see how simple it can. Oh, that's it. You see, so good, Jenny. The words are simple. I'd appreciate it. I need, I'd very much like it if, how would you feel about, this is my preference. Tell me your preference and we can see, where we meet. The wording and the languaging is simple. What's not so simple is getting through all the internal layers of resistance and impediment that we have. They're not going to like me. They're going to reject me. They're going to push me away. They're going to get angry. On and on and on. They're going to talk about me. They're going to gossip. All those things are at play for many of us. And that's what makes it difficult to set the boundary. So there's more to digest here than just the language, but having the language, I think, does make it easier. So I just want to wrap up here by saying that I'm going to refer to my newsletter, which, by the way, if you'd like a copy, just email me again, Catherine@catherineduca.com. Put add me in the subject line and I'll know what you're looking for. And you'll have my newsletter in your inbox the very next Sunday at 5:00 in the morning. Okay. Self-respect protects your insides. It protects your insides. It helps you prioritize your needs, preserve your energy, and avoid becoming drained by toxic behavior. Self-respect enables you to stay grounded in your own values. When you respect yourself, you are much more likely to make choices and decisions that align with your values and goals. If you have too much static in your mind about, displeasing the other person, or you're worried about some consequence there, and therefore you don't set the boundary, you're not acting in accordance with your deeper values, with what you truly want. And any decision made from misalignment, you can bet your bottom dollar, is not going to be the best decision possible. Self-respect empowers you. It gives you confidence to speak up for yourself, use your voice, and assert your needs. And lastly, self-respect, this is a big one, actually, helps you attract and keep healthier relationships. This one is simple. When you respect yourself, as I said before, you radiate a certain vibration, and that vibration is picked up by others. And so when you respect yourself, you are infinitely more likely to attract people who not only respect you, but respect themselves. Now the chances increase that you are in a relationship with someone who is in themselves, in their own right, a whole person, an autonomous person, able to speak their truth. And here you are doing the same. And so you have two people joined, two people coming together. And that's not the same as two people being enmeshed, being one in the way where we're not differentiated. I spoke about differentiation a couple of weeks ago, if you want to go back and listen. All right. It's very important to be whole and autonomous people if what you want is a healthy, mutually gratifying, life-affirming relationship. So, dear friends, I think before I go over time, that's it on self-respect. I believe it is as important as self-love. I think it's actually an outgrowth of self-love. As you go about your week, I hope you'll keep some of these points in mind. I hope you'll listen to this broadcast again if you need to remind yourself. Go out there, take your self-respect on the road. See how it plays. See how people look at you. See how people respond to you. And by the way, be prepared to respect other people's boundaries as well. This really is a two-way street. Really a two-way street. So, dear listeners, wide receivers, we have another Sunday under our belt. I wish you well. Take good care. Know that you are not only loved, you are so loved. You are so loved by the divine, by the infinite. And guess what? You are so loved by me. But not only that, you are love. You can't help it. You don't get the credit. It just came with your birth. It came with who you are. Nothing you can do about it. You are love. All right. Take good care. I'll meet you back next week. You've been listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. Until next time, take care. Love you all. Good night.